According to the latest reports, the Utah Utes are not a lock to join the Big Ten in future conference realignment. What does that mean? We're going to discuss on today's Locked On Utes.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first view and listen of the day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. If it's your first time listening to this show, make sure you like and subscribe. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. That's all caps, no spaces, for $20 off your first purchase. My name is JT Wistricll, former intern inside the University of Utah Athletic Department. On today's show, we are going to be talking about what Utah is looking to do in the transfer portal. Then we'll be talking about Utah gymnastics, wrapping up their season at the end, but have to start with an interesting report that came out over the weekend that I thought was worth discussing, because we've seen a couple reports come out before from Jim Williams. This is a guy who's a 7-time Emmy Award-winning producer and director and TV and executive, a sports media columnist at Athlon Sports, contributor to Forbes, and the Newsweek, CEO of LJC and LLC Media. So Jim Williams, someone who's been around, who has sources. How do I know he has sources? Well, he says as much, and he is a credited media member. This is far different to me than a random Ute Zone post, and I think it's cool that we talked about this last week. I think it's really cool that Ute Zone has and provides that community, but you saw someone come in there, make a fake account, and post something, and that, but just because he said, I'm hearing this, I don't know who that is. So I didn't want to talk about that last week, but this is something that's worth talking about to me. So Jim Williams, in his latest report, said, post Happy Easter to all, this week spoke to 3 Big Ten officials who are part of the vetting team who look into possible new members. To sum up what they told me, there's a great deal to like about Utah football, and we feel they would be a good fit. But he says they are a lock. It's pretty clear. He says he meant to say they are not a lock. We have plenty of candidates to go over before we explore adding more teams. At this point, no one is a lock. That's the important thing to remember right there, is that no one is a lock to join the conference. And the question then becomes, well, why is no one a lock to join the conference? And no one's a lock to join the conference because conference realignment is always shifting, shaping, evolving. And I think there's a lot of questions too about, hey, when the next round of conference realignment comes, in what sounds like it will be when the ACC kind of implodes and you have the likes of Clemson and Florida State that are going to be willing to bite the bullet on the buyout money and then leave the conference, that's when it's going to come. So I do think we're a few years down the road from anything happening. And am I surprised that Utah is not a lock to join the Big Ten based on this report? No. Why would Utah be a lock to join the Big Ten? Was I excited about the opportunity for Utah to potentially be a Big Ten team just with the rumors and reports of conference realignment stuff a couple of years ago? Yeah, I thought it would have been something that'd be exciting for the Utah brand to be in one of the top 2 conferences. But I don't see how Utah has put themselves in a position where, especially after this last season they're coming off of, where all of a sudden they are one of the top brands in the sport that the Big Ten is clamoring to add. And I love Utah. I talk about Utah constantly on this show, but I just don't view Utah as one of the gems of conference realignment when you look at national appeal. Salt Lake City is a great city. There is tons of hype, love, passion about this team, but Utah is not the Clemsons, the Florida State to me. Like, those are the teams that are going to, North Carolina I'd add as well. Like, that just, there's more national intrigue with those teams than Utah, who is obviously very popular in Utah, but outside of Utah, that's not as much something you see. It's a school that definitely matters and has a lot of value, and I love covering, and I think this team has a chance to do some big things in the Big 12, and their conference realignment future is going to hinge on what they do in the Big 12. But as for this and them not being a lock to join the conference, that doesn't surprise me. And I'm very curious to see, once again, like, what does the next round of conference realignment look like? Is it Big 10 teams adding more teams? Probably what that'll be, right? Big 10 SEC. But do they also shed some teams? Maryland, Rutgers, talked about that a little bit on Big 12 squad shows in the past, that some of these top schools may start shedding teams. And I think that would be crazy if you see teams starting to get kicked out of leagues. So I don't think that would happen to Utah in the Big 12, obviously. But that actually brings me to another point, honestly. And I know last year I was one of the people who said, like, hey, I would love if Utah could get into the Big 10. I think that'd be really good for the Utah brand and everything. Sometimes you got to be careful. Sometimes be careful what you wish for, because you just might get it, right? Well, sometimes you can look back on something you say you wanted, then you realize you don't really want it. I don't know about you guys, but I was thinking about this the other day. I love that Utah's in a conference where they can compete for conference championships. And yes, last year didn't go to plan, but Utah was in a ton of one-score games with some of the best. Arizona State, BYU, they didn't have a cakewalk against Utah, did they? So I don't watch those games and go, yep, Utah is so far off from doing anything in this conference. I think this team could easily bounce back this year and be right at the top. I honestly think they're going to have a chance to win the conference. And with the way Devin Dampier and a lot of the pieces look during spring ball, give me a lot of hope and optimism as long as Utah can execute on a couple things in the spring portal, which, as I mentioned, we're going to talk about in the second segment a little bit deeper. But going back to Utah being happy in the Big 12, I just love that Utah is staying at one of the forefronts of, I love that Utah is in a conference where they have a chance to compete for a national championship. And a chance for compete, not a national championship, a conference championship. Washington doesn't really seem like they have that right now. Could they get that back? Sure. But the Washington brand, at least year one, kind of felt like it took a little bit of a hit joining the Big Ten. And there's some brands, Nebraska, I would say as such. Sometimes you join a big conference like that, and because you can't compete at the very top, your brand takes a hit. I want Utah to be able to compete at the highest level they can. I think the highest level is the Big 12 in terms of setting themselves up for success to then get into the college football playoff, and that's where you hope that you can knock off some teams and get some upsets. I think entering a conference with Ohio State and Oregon in the NIL era would not be good for Utah. As this sport shifts more and more to collectives, and also just the revenue sharing is part of this, but more so than anything, collective still, I think you're going to see the Ohio States and the Oregons consistently have some of the best rosters in college football because that's what they can afford to have. So then if you're Utah, why would you want to go there when you can stay in the Big 12? And you have some teams, BYU, although they're losing guys as well too. So it doesn't feel like BYU's NIL for football is as robust as it is for basketball. For basketball, they're paying 2 million individuals alone, 8.5 million just combined. If you do Dumbansa and Wright, the Baylor basketball player just transferred over. And for football, I'd be interested to see what like the total payroll for their roster is there. Obviously more guys, but losing a guy like starting linebacker, starting receiver, especially a guy like Taggart, like that's a big loss for BYU. We can talk about that on another show. But anyways, and then you get like a Texas Tech, obviously, as they've bought a really good roster as well too. I shouldn't just say bought. They're doing positive things. But NIL has obviously played a big role in this, and they've retained some really good basketball players because of how good their NIL is too. So if you're Utah, do you want to go to the Big Ten? In terms of if super conferences form and it is survival is getting into those conferences in terms of being a P4 team, or not even P4 at that point, but just like having a chance to compete for the best. I think it'd be bad for Utah if they fell out of having that chance, like Washington State and Oregon State are going to. Then, of course, go to the Big Ten. But honestly, when we sit back and look at everything that's kind of happened, I think it worked out the best for Utah to be in the Big 12. I really enjoyed the Big 12. There's a bunch of rivals in the Big 12, I feel like, already building and forming. This is a conference that I feel like Utah can win any year. Like, just call it what it is. Would Utah win the Big Ten anytime soon if they join the Big Ten? I don't see that being the case. And I think this team can win the Big 12 right away because this conference is wide open, and that's what I love about it. So did find the reporting interesting from Williams, but I do think, and I think he's absolutely right, that Utah's not locked to join the Big Ten, and I don't expect them to join the Big Ten anytime soon. One thing I do expect Utah to do soon is act on a couple of needs they have in the portal. I'm going to talk about a player who's going to be visiting Utah and what he would bring to the program, as well as some of the needs and things that Utah still needs to target in the portal after what we saw with the added data that is the spring game. We'll discuss that in a moment. But first, today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by our friends at Supply House. Get the supplies you need from the site made for skilled trades. Supply House. Whether you're into plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from 400-plus top brands, you'll find exactly what you need delivered fast from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Supply House offers expert support and industry-leading services, so you'll always be able to talk to a real person. And for trade pros looking for the extra edge, their free Trade Master program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage. Now it's your turn. Join the Trade Master program today at supplyhouse.com/DM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, use that promo code SH5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. Once again, you can head over to supplyhouse.com/TM and use that promo code SH5 for 5% off your first order at supplyhouse.com. You can head over and check it out right now. Today's episode of Locked On Utes is also brought to you by our friends at Post District. Discover Post District, home to 4 of Salt Lake's newest and most stylish apartment buildings: the Register, Post House North, Post House South, and the 801 Flats. Each residence offers its own unique take on luxury urban living, with features like waterfall kitchen islands, floor-to-ceiling windows, vaulted ceilings, and spacious patios. Plus, you also get walk-in closets. You can enjoy premium amenities, including the city's largest residential gym, a year-round pool, golf simulator, massive TV wall for sports watch parties, and more, all anchored by a one-of-a-kind community. Step outside and find yourself immersed in Salt Lake's hottest dining and nightlife scene with award-winning spots like Urban Hill, Men's Show Ramen, Level Crossing, Melancholy Wine Bar, and Sunday's Best just steps away. Whether you're looking for a studio, 1, 2, 3 bedroom, or penthouse, find your perfect home today. Visit liveatpost.com or call 801-590-6247. Mention this ad for an exclusive incentive too. Once again, you can head over to visit liveatpost.com or call 801-590-6247, and you can mention this ad for an exclusive incentive. Discover Post District today. All right, coming back in here, talking about the transfer portal. It's something that's going to be active. The spring portal, I feel like this year might be one of the biggest years we've seen for the spring portal. We already have Nico Iliama-Ava, who Colin Cowherd said last week that he was going to UCLA, so we said he was going to UCLA, but apparently the ink wasn't dotted yet, I guess, because that became official yesterday. So it is exciting that even more official now that Nico is for sure going to be making his UCLA debut against the Utah Utes. I'm really excited to see that game, and that's something we'll only get to continue to break down as we get closer to that matchup too. But one question still looms is, hey, who is going to be the guys out there for Utah? And we got a better idea of that in the spring game, but this is still a Utah team that has some holes, and you're going to try to fill those in the transfer portal. And that's what Utah is looking to do with Furman cornerback Jalen Moson, who Pete Nakos of On3 Sports reported that Moson is visiting Utah and South Alabama. And this is a guy who he was a all-SoCon freshman defensive selection. So exciting to have him in the portal. And when you're talking about what he did over his career, didn't do a ton in 2023, but as a redshirt freshman last year, he had 16 total tackles, 12 of those solo, 4 assisted, and 1 interception with 2 yards too. So a guy who wasn't targeted a ton, obviously, if he's earning that type of recognition. 5'11", 173, the former Georgia product, was productive. And anytime Sharif Shaw and Morgan Scalley have their eyes on a cornerback, I think that's incredibly exciting. And Utah, their eye for evaluating talent is something that definitely piques my interest. Based on his height, definitely seems like he'll be a slot type corner. And this is a guy to me that probably could use a year to come up, learn the ropes, and then next year probably have a larger role, especially if a guy like Smith Snowden is able to leave after this year. Do I think that's going to happen? Right now, I'll say no, but I don't know. 2-year starter, but got a little bit of action as a freshman. Snowden may stay another year. He may go. We'll see what he ends up doing with that. But cornerback as well is definitely an area that I think Utah needs to add depth. As we've talked about on this show, I like the top 3 corners that Utah has. I think you need 3 to 5 you feel good about, maybe even 6 in a perfect world, because it feels like every year one corner gets hurt. Kenneth Johnson was that guy last year. There's been several, and we all remember when Mekhi Bernard had to go out there and play corner, right? So cornerback injuries happen to Utah, and it happened everywhere. And I should say injuries especially happen to Utah with what they've been through the last couple of years. So you can never have too much depth, right? And I definitely think that adding more cornerback depth is good. Although I like the way the corners looked in spring ball. We saw the wide receivers deal with some drops, but also part of the reason they weren't able to get separation is because Utah still has really good defensive backs. Smith Snowden hold down the spot in the slot. Elijah Davis on the outside showed a lot of promising things. I really like Blake Cotton. Sounds like he had a strong spring. Then you get the other guys out there, Rock Caldwell, Don Saunders, LaTristan Thompson, like a lot of guys. And this would be another one right here of, hey, another nice added depth piece. And Jalen Moson is, if he produces this year, great. If not, he's a guy next year you hope can come on. And if he ends up hitting the portal after 1 year because he didn't play, well, that's the transfer portal. And you'll find someone else, honestly, in that regard. So I do think this would be a good addition for Utah entering the 2025 season as they look to shore up the depth at the cornerback spot. But after we got to see the spring game, what are the positional needs for Utah? I'm probably going to do a full show on this at some point this week. I think quarterback 2 is a need for this team. I liked what I saw from Isaac Wilson, Bird Ficklin, Zerbrug. All of them showed positive things. None of them have played good football at the collegiate level. And I like Isaac. I think he's got a chance to turn it around. Maybe this year he takes that sophomore leap. Shouldn't have been out there. Just calling it what it is. I did not think Isaac Wilson was very good last year from a, hey, can you execute in this standpoint? Can you make this throw? Can you do this? He wasn't able to do that. So how am I going to feel good as him as the backup next year? Is the offense better on paper right now than it was a year ago? Yes. But still at the end of the day, if he gets pressured, which he struggled with last year, no, the offensive line is going to be better, but he still struggled with pressure. How's that going to go over? So those are my concerns with Wilson there. I think this team really could use a veteran backup. I think that'd be a nice thing to add. Is it incredibly hard to find? Yes. Really wish Bryson Barnes was still on this team, just based on how he played, how he executed. What do I want in a Utah backup? I do not want a backup quarterback. Well, okay, I guess I want it. I'll be realistic. I'm not expecting Utah to land a backup quarterback where Devin Dampier gets hurt and then right away Utah is still in the conference, still contending in the conference. Like, I don't see that happening any year. But I want a backup quarterback that if the starter goes down for 1 to 2 games, you can at least split that, if not win both. That is exactly what Bryson Barnes was. Washington State game from a couple years ago. And there's another game as well, too, that I'm forgetting. But obviously, Utah won several games with Bryson at quarterback and nearly beat that Washington team that ended up going to the Pac-12 title game. Or not the Pac-12 title game, the national championship game with Bryson Barnes at quarterback. So that's the type of veteran quarterback I'd love for this team to find, a veteran backup. And they don't have that on this roster. I thought that was going to be Nate Johnson. After seeing him run routes as much as he did, at this point, I'm convinced he's definitely not a quarterback anymore. And that's where Utah feels he's at his best. So more power to him. And I think more power to Utah. And I think that Johnson has a chance to be a special playmaker there. So incredibly intrigued by what he'll do coming up. But yeah, we'll talk more about maybe veteran backup targets, but I would love to see Utah be able to add that. Outside of that, definitely sounds like wide receivers in need. I know there's some drops, but we're still kind of waiting on Otto Tia to be the second best receiver for this team or really step up. I think Tia can be that guy, but if you want to bring in another guy, maybe that's going to be Micah Hudson, the 5-star from Texas Tech, who's in the portal still. We're waiting to see everything there. So another receiver could be good. I like the guys Utah has in the slot. I think Ryan Davis, with the connection he has with Dampier, showed he's ready to make this leap. So I like him there. I like what Zacharias Williams did. You got guys like Justin Stevenson, Otto T. If you don't add anyone else, that's fine. Wide receiver was never going to be the strength of this team. But it'd be nice if you could add another guy. And I do think Utah will add at least someone. Outside of that, I still want to see more in the defensive tackle room. I know Laia didn't end up playing, but Vaimahi, Dallas Bakalaki, Carson Kafusi showed some promising signs, but I don't love relying on freshmen. So I really want this team to add another D tackle. They did go after someone. I think it was like Ian Jeffries, I want to say, but he already committed to Purdue, so that's unfortunate. But this team needs to add a defensive tackle to me. They lost too much last year, got to add a D tackle. Another defensive end could be in play. Utah didn't get a ton of pressure in the spring game, but I feel all right about the bodies they have there. So if they do add one, great. But if not, I know they've done a ton of work in the defensive end room. Outside of that, I've said many times on this show, I'd love an interior offensive lineman. I know we've heard a lot about the Utah offensive line, and maybe they will be the best unit in the Big 12, one of the best in the country. I like a lot of the pieces. I still think you have 2 massive question marks in the interior offensive line that I just want to see it before I believe it, based on how last year went. There's a large jump that we're asking some guys to make. I feel like to get to where we're saying like this offensive line's incredible, and the tackles are. I think Michael Mogafisi is really good. Tongai and Kump, just based on what I saw last year, I didn't see those guys. I didn't see last year best offensive line in college football with those 2 guys a part of it. So prove me wrong. Go out there and do that. But I'm just telling you, based on what I watched and going back and watching those games, that's what I see. So hope that works out that way. That's what I'd love for Utah to do as well, too. But yeah, I think Utah does not have a ton of needs here, right? Like if they could add another linebacker, sure. But I like Lander Barton, Le'Veon Demooney, and I still think Jonathan Hall is going to be a really good player for this team as well. Thatcher, Polu, really exciting guys. So I like a lot what Utah's going on. And I don't think Teo Johnson and Rabbit Evans or Nate Ritchie played in the spring game by choice. Like maybe there was something there, but I don't think Utah wanted to show those guys off, because especially Johnson and Ritchie, or excuse me, especially Johnson and Evans, I think are the best safety tandem in the Big 12. And I think they're going to have monster seasons. Let me know in the comments what you guys think this Utah team needs to add in the transfer portal. We're going to talk about the Utah gymnastics team in a moment, because they made it to the national championship again. How did they fare over the weekend in Texas? We'll tell you about it shortly. But first, today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by our friends at Game Time. There's nothing like the atmosphere of an NBA playoff game. Every bucket, every defensive stop, every moment feels huge. It's electric in the arena, and with Game Time, you can be part of it without the stress of last-minute ticket hunting. Game Time makes it fast and easy to get playoff tickets, even when demand is sky high. Prices on the app actually go down as tip-off gets closer, and their last-minute deals can save you up to 60%. Here's why I use Game Time. Their last-minute deals save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concert, comedy, and theater events too. So also has that all-in pricing, which means no surprise fees at checkouts. When what you see is what you pay. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCalls. That's all caps, no spaces, for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create that account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. You can download Game Time today. Use that code LOCKEDONCollege, all caps, no space, for $20 off your first purchase with Game Time. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed with Game Time. In honor of Spencer McLaughlin, for those of you who longtime listeners, second segment sip. I didn't do that, so we're going to take a third segment sip. For those of you who watch our Big 12 squad shows, Mountaineer Paul, I think he cracks a doob in the second segment, he said. So I did not do a good enough job staying hydrated on this episode, but we got to talk about this Utah gymnastics team real quick at the end of this episode. So the Utah gymnastics team, it didn't go the way they'd hoped in Texas. 49 years in a row, though, to the national championships. Did the team obviously want to win? Of course they did, but I'm also just saying, and we talked about this in the past, but that is such an incredible accomplishment. 49 years in a row to make the national championships. They end up getting fourth in the national championship meet. Actually got first going into it to qualify because you play those top four teams. It's 8 teams in total in their regional action. The first game, they won that one and then ended up getting fourth. And, a couple falls, couple violations. It just wasn't exactly what Utah was hoping for there. But hats off to this Red Rocks team, what Coach Carly Dockendorf and them were able to do. They end up getting fourth with a 197-23.75. And originally they were third. Then they went back and reviewed it. And then Missouri ended up moving ahead of them just barely at 197-2500. UCLA was second, 197-61.25. Oklahoma won it pretty handily at 198. It was kind of after the first set, you knew that Utah was in trouble based on how it kind of played out. And yeah, it didn't end up going in their favor. But this is a Utah program. Players like McKenna Smith, Grace McCollum have accomplished so much as part of this team, and so many individuals, right? When you're talking about an Amelia Morgan too, and Avery Neff, Ella Zerbies, these are Jalen Gilstrap. And I know she didn't compete this year, but somewhat because of the injury that she suffered. But Jaden Rucker, another one that's been part of this team's success. The Utah gymnastics culture is phenomenal. I had some family that was on one of the teams that was competing at Utah, and they told me against Utah, they are at Utah, but against Utah. They said that's a gymnastics environment unlike anything we've ever seen. That's a credit to you guys, the fans, but also the culture that Coach Dockendorf and this Utah gymnastics team have built. Utah in the Big 12 right away was their normal self, 12-4 overall in the season. They had that rough quad meet early on, but outside of that, they were fantastic. They ended the year 5-0 at home, 4-0 on the road, 3-4 at neutral site, 6-0 in Big 12 action. They won their final 5 games before finishing fourth in the national championships. But to make it 49 years in a row, the likes of LSU, Florida, they didn't get in. Utah consistently gets in. First place is what this team wanted in this meet, but the fact that they continue to get in and they continue to prove they're among the best programs in the country year in and year out. Because obviously Florida and LSU still are, but they weren't there. They weren't in the national championship. Oklahoma stumbled last year. They weren't there. The fact that Utah is a huge credit to the consistency of this team. Everything did not go to plan in the national championships, but hats off to the Utah gymnastics program for another outstanding season. Always a great day to be a Ute, especially when you're watching the Utah gymnastics team. So once again, hats off to them for a fantastic season. But that's going to do it for this episode. We still got some baseball and softball going on, but crazy how quickly the year is winding down. It feels like in some ways it's been forever since football. And in other ways, it's wow, we're already close to the end of another collegiate athletic season. So things are just passing through. During the off season, I do want to ask you guys, hey, what do you want to hear me talk about on the show? Leave it in the comments below, especially those of you that are willing to listen to the very end. Thank you so much for staying with it through the third segment for us today. Drop it in the comments. What do you want to hear me talk about on the show? What transfer portal positions do you feel like Utah needs to target? What did you guys think about the spring game this weekend? We're going to talk about the portal, recruiting, transfer portal targets all this week on Locked On Utes. Maybe the offseason for Utah football, basketball, now even gymnastics. But there is no offseason on Locked On Utes, so we'll be back with you tomorrow. Also, make sure you check out Locked On NFL Draft. We appreciate you making Locked On Utes your first listen today. For your second listen, check out Locked On NFL Draft with Damian Parsons and Keith Sanchez as your favorite collegiate players get rated for the next level. Get the latest draft rankings, rumors, and news every day. Find Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. I can't wait this week to find out where's Corey Reed going to go? Where are we going to see the likes of Brant Keithy end up? Samaya Vaughn, Junior Tafuna. There's a lot of guys. Should be a fun draft and should be a fun week of Utah news. So make sure you keep it at Locked On Utes, where we talk about your favorite team every day. Have a good Monday, everyone.